All right. Good evening, everybody. I'm Debbie Rosen. This is Lindsay,
Hi there.
and we understand that the date was wrong on the thanks for joining, so I apologize for that. But we are going to go ahead and just start in a couple minutes if everybody can hear us. Hi, Dana.
Hi, I was having trouble getting in. I'm so sorry about that.
No, that's okay. If you can hear us out there, then go ahead and put something in the chat like good evening, hello, how are you? Hopefully everyone can hear us.
Great.
Hi, Jamie.
Okay.
Great.
Yay, people can. That's terrific.
Yes, thank you, everybody. And especially thanks to Jamie, because that first one is always helps bring my heart rate down. Good evening, everybody.
Could I introduce you, or would you like to go ahead?
No. I just wanted to go ahead and get started because I knew that the date was wrong. I didn't want people to panic thinking they were 2 days early.
I know. I'm so sorry I was having trouble getting in. I had to close the bar underneath in order for it to let me push the join button. And I didn't realize that. Anyway, my apologies to everyone for that.
That's okay. We're still at 7:29, so we like to just start a couple of minutes early just to, join a couple of minutes early, say hello to everybody. I know that we will have a number of other people still joining, so you're more than welcome to launch off whenever you think it makes sense.
I am thinking probably about 7:31, just to let people get in and get settled. But on the other hand, if we could respect people's time, sorry about that baby bird here. We could respect people's time and get started right at 7:30 if you'd like. Janet, if you are listening, if you have any input, otherwise,
fast talkers. 7:31 sounds perfect.
Okay. Terrific.
I see the numbers ticking up, so I know that there's a number of people just joining. Thank you, Marielle. We're happy to do this.
I've been really looking forward to this. I think we're all on a spectrum for executive function skills, just as we are for so many other things. The kind of thing I think we all need.
Yes, I was explaining today to somebody, a parent that I was speaking to, that I really have to consistently work on my inhibition skills, which is why I have all these chocolate chips here, because I had poor inhibition before this started.
I have to work on the balancing skills. What do I do now? What do I do next? It's a luxury to be able to focus on just one thing for a while, but sometimes it means letting something else go so you don't do that.
Sure is right.
Yeah, absolutely.
We as moms know that it's a luxury to be able to focus on just one thing for a while.
Absolutely. Especially with multiple kids.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And many of us have multiple very different kids.
Yeah,
I know I
absolutely. Do. Absolutely. And animals. I have one right out here waiting for me.
Aw, how sweet.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm trying to get my auxiliary light out of the shot because it's there we go. It's anyway. Okay, so I see that it looks like it's time. It's 7:31. Shall we start? How many people do we have?
It's 60 and counting.
Okay, so I think we'll probably be adding some over the next 5 minutes or so. But let's get started, which will respect the time commitment and devotion of the people who are with us. So good evening. Thank you so much for joining us for this first in our series of webinars for parents. Executive function skills are such essential life skills that we all need to have. And some of them don't necessarily come naturally. We all have different strengths and weaknesses in them. So it's really fantastic to be able to learn about them from these two fantastic experts who are going to teach us tonight, and then again on March 3rd and April 7th. We are thrilled and grateful to have them with us. First, I just want to say we're Yorktown PTA. I'm Dana Milburn, president, but I'd also like to very much highlight and thank our chair of the Family Network, Janet Pence, who has made all of this possible. Thank you so much, Janet, for all of your wonderful hard work. And you'll see we have a number of other programs Janet has put together for us, and we are just thrilled to have her, and we just couldn't do without her. Thank you, Janet. So let me tell you a bit about Debbie Rosen and Lindsay Toms. They are the owners of StudyPro, an executive function and study skills center in McLean, so just next door. The StudyPro works with students to help them better manage the process of school. This means helping students become better planners, time managers, initiators, organizers, and completers of work. Most students aren't taught these skills, yet they are so deeply needed to be successful at school and throughout their careers. You also can find the StudyPro online at www.thestudypro.com. Thank you so much, Debbie and Lindsay, and take it away.
Yes, thank you, Dana. We really appreciate that. And we are very excited to be here. Thanks to Janet and to Yorktown for, of course, Yorktown PTA for having us. I'm the one who says but my name is actually Debbie Rosen, and Lindsay is here, who actually typed her name out. And we are the co-owners of the StudyPro. So we were jump right in because, as you said, we want to use everybody's time. And Dana, you're more than welcome to stay on if you wanted to mute or stop your video. I think you can do that on the top. I should say stop video or mute. Hopefully you can find that up on top. But we are looking forward to chatting and taking advantage of the chat that everyone started using here today, because we really do want everybody to be participating, and we are leaving time for the questions and answers at the end. But before I jump right into here, I wanted to share that, as Dana said, we are part of the StudyPro. We're the owners of the StudyPro, and so we are an executive function and study skills center. So this is a topic that's near and dear to our hearts. We spend every waking minute of every day thinking about executive function and study skills. And so we do know that executive functions are something that have a greater understanding now than they did 5 years ago. And even when I was, first got involved many years ago, where we really have to use the words executive functions at the end of a sentence because people didn't really understand them. However, when I talk to parents, which I do every day, I know a lot of times there's a general understanding of what executive functions are, but not really a deep understanding. So why is it important to have a deep understanding of executive function? Because the executive functions are really often the root causes, or where underdeveloped executive functions are often the root causes of challenges that many of our students have at school. And when we're talking about the executive function and study skills, we're really referring to the process side of school. So throughout this evening, we're going to really talk about the two sides of school. There's the content piece, and you can think of those really as the verticals, the history and the math and the science and the languages, etc. And then there's the process piece of school, which is really underlying all of that. And it's a foundation that has to be strong, because as we move from elementary to middle to high school to college, it really has to grow with us. And the example that I always use is, if you think of your skier, you're familiar at all with skiing, you start skiing, on the green hills. And you can say, I'm a great skier, because I'm a great skier on the green hills. But then when you're moving to the blue hills, which are a little steeper and often a little bumpier, you need different skills. And think of that as the move from elementary to middle school. So the moral equivalent to that in middle school is you're getting longer papers, you're getting more teachers, you're having to manage your schedule. Now you're moving to high school and maybe even college, and now you're in the Black Hills. All of a sudden there's this new thing called moguls, right? And moguls are much more challenging. So what's really important to understand is that doesn't mean you're not a great skier. What it really means is that you are just in need of deeper skills. And so that's really what we're here to talk about today. So to start with the chat, I was thinking if everybody could just jump in the chat and say, if you are thinking about a particular student, what is the age or grade of that student that you're thinking about when you're talking, that motivated you to come here to this tonight, to this talk tonight. And that will help us kind of understand what we're looking at. It sounds like middle school, a lot of middle school and high school. That's really helpful. Thank you to everybody that's sharing in the chat. So what we're going to do tonight, and the goals that we really have, are to ensure that by understanding a deeper level executive functions for our middle schoolers and high schoolers, we can understand where, if there are challenges, where the culprit is. So is it really if we're not as great at taking tests, or we're struggling with starting our work, or we're struggling with completing our work, really what's the culprit behind it? Why does that matter? It matters because the only way we can be solutions oriented and actually help to resolve those conflicts or those issues are when we truly understand them. And then we'll talk a little bit about kind of the what to do. So how do we effectively communicate and support our kids to help improve their executive functions? So if we use our working memory, which is an executive function, and think about that age of what we just put in the chat, maybe as we're looking through this list of these common behaviors that we see across the process piece, across the process of doing school, getting started, staying focused, tracking work, turning in work, staying motivated. Are there any of these that jump out? Can you put in the chat what's one thing that might jump out for your 4th and 5th grader, 6th grader, 8th grader, 11th grader, that you find that they're really the most challenged with now? Is it just getting started? Yep, self-advocating, staying focused, getting started, tracking work. Yeah, that's what we're seeing. And we often see that a lot of times the way that parents talk about skills or about challenges is through these behaviors. So what we hope to accomplish tonight, and what we're going to start with now and moving over to Lindsay, is really understanding what those executive functions are, so that we can say, okay, when we see these behaviors, we actually see this underdeveloped executive function underneath it, so that we know exactly what to do and try to help improve these behaviors. I'm going to turn it over to Lindsay.
I love what I'm seeing in the chat. A lot of asking for help, a lot of staying focused, a lot of motivation, tracking work and assignments. So as you have that pictured in your mind, we're going to move into what the executive functions are. But before we do, I just want you to hold in your mind here that really your executive function, which is part of that frontal lobe, is your ability to control your thoughts, your feelings, and your actions to achieve a goal. So it's those three things: the thoughts, your feelings, and your actions to achieve a goal. And often, a lot of the times, we think of goals as these big long-term goals, like get into college. And even it's a long-term goal to do well in a class. What is do well? Okay, get an A in that class. Well, there's a long-term goal for that. Then there's mini goals within them. So just keeping in mind that it's the thoughts, feelings, and actions. We're going to move to the next slide and show you what those 8 executive functions are. Now, when you see this, you do not need to have these memorized. You do not need to know them the way that Debbie and I might know them as working as an executive function or being executive function. I'm just going to highlight a few for you. And if you're thinking about what you were just sharing in the chat, tracking homework. That's part of a lot of these different executive functions. I might have to use my skill to plan and organize. Chunking work is one of them. How do I break down a task and chunk it and plan for what days I'm going to do it? I saw a lot of managing their emotions. That is an executive function. That part of their brain, all of those ages, even I think I saw a college, like a dual enrollment, someone in a community college right now, that student's frontal lobe is still developing, because what we know is that it develops through your mid-20s. So all of these skills that they need for school success are currently developing. And how they develop, honestly, is they got to use them before they're ready. So what you're seeing from a lot of your students is them using them poorly because they're underdeveloped right now. They need to build the strategies, and they need to build the experience of actually using. So on the next slide here, we have the definitions, the more concrete definitions of those 8 executive functions. I'm not going to go through each one, but this is a good one to screenshot or take a picture, but I'll take this moment to say, yes, the slides will be shared, send them out in an email after, and then they'll also be available on the play of this webinar and this. But again, don't think you have to have them memorized. Just notice what you might be seeing in your student right now. So Debbie mentioned the working memory, big one that they're asked to use in school time. The traditional way you might think of working memory would be, remember what formula I need to apply for a certain math problem. But it's also about, can I hold on to information that I'm hearing from my teacher, the directions, and then go apply it on that assignment. So the key takeaway here is just that they are developing and they're used every day before they're ready to be successful in school. So we'll move on to the next slide here, because the point is we often know that they need these skills as well. They need their executive function skills, then they need these traditional study skills here. So these are the skills that we teach here at our center, and they're expected at school. They're expected to be able to know how to take notes and receive information the best way possible for them. How am I going to receive that information? So a lot of what I saw in the chat was attention, staying focused. So note-taking is one way that we can receive information, but I have to use a lot of my executive function skills to inhibit, like Debbie said. When you think of inhibition, we often say we might be saying to our student, you're just addicted to TikTok. You can't live without your phone. That can be a barrier for receiving the information as much as possible, the best way possible. And a lot of what we say is, and we see from our students is, when the grades on the test aren't as good as what they expected, when they said, oh, but I studied, it's usually because they don't have the skills, they're underdeveloped, and they don't know how to study. They're just looking over their notes. They're looking over the slides. They're rereading or skimming over the chapter. That is not studying. It's not helping them retain that information, not helping them consolidate it, then being able to receive it and retrieve it on demand on the test. One of the biggest aha moments for students that when we're working with them is they say, the goal of studying is to get it wrong. The goal is to study is to get it wrong. Find out what you don't know. So if you're reading the textbook or you're rereading your notes, there's no way to get that wrong. You don't want to get it wrong for the first time on a test. So what we do is we work on these skills and the why behind them, right? So we can see how these are such the fundamental pieces to that success. So we'll look to the next slide and we can see we have a little visual here of really how they build upon each other. Oh, Debbie, are you muted? Maybe.
Sorry. To summarize what Lindsay was saying, really that's what we hope that we're picturing, you can see here, is that as she used the example, if you want to, you take your notes, if you want study school, which is the blue middle section, which is taking notes or active studying, you really need those executive function skills to be strong as a base, because if you can't initiate or can't inhibit, or you can't control your emotions, or you have a hard time planning and organizing, it's very difficult, if not impossible, to use those study skills. And it's really those built on top of it that lead to the actions that build success in school. So often we hear a comment, you know, my student was doing so well, and then. And so what really happens is that they were doing so well because school was that green hill in the analogy with skiing. School was really based on the content. I could do my worksheet, I could get my worksheet done, I could keep everything I needed to do in my brain because I didn't really need to know that much. I could remember what I need for history, I could remember I can memorize my spelling and do my math worksheet. And then what happens is you go to the blue hills and you go to the black hills, and all of a sudden school is really reliant on mastering the process piece, on how well do I remember what work I have to do, or how well can I, how often do I go to my portal, what is my ability to inhibit other distractions or to stay focused when I'm looking through that portal when maybe different teachers are all posting things in different ways. Once I do that, do I get overwhelmed by looking at the directions? And, you know, can I break those directions down in chunks so that I can overcome that? And all the way through to what we hear often, which is sometimes my student will do the work and then forget to turn it in, or they'll turn it in the wrong way, or they'll forget some of the questions on there. So these are not necessarily all issues that every student has, but there's certainly common issues that we hear a lot. So what happens when, you know, we do have that shift from the content requirements of school, and all of a sudden now the process outweighs that? And really the answer to that question is that we need to learn how to learn. We need to build our skills so that we can navigate the bumps or the moguls that are on those black hills. And we also, as parents, want to start thinking about how can I help shift my help from the content side, which is helping them write that paper, helping them, helping them to finish that project or to do that math problem, to the process side. So how can I now help them to make a plan or to get started or to study for that test so they can get those wrong, as Lindsay had said. And the way that we look at all of these executive function skills are literally, the key word is skills. These are all skills that can be developed. The great thing about skills is that they can all be learned. And so we want to look at every barrier that we've talked about tonight, rushing or not knowing, or all the things we talked about so far, and say, what strategies can we use to fill those gaps? Because that's really what executive function coaching, or what we do to build any type of skill, is to help join our students where they are and help them build those skills. And the reason why that matters so much is because, just like if you had a headache, it doesn't really help to take a headache. If you had consistent headaches, it doesn't really help, only to take aspirin. What you want to do is eventually find out what is the root cause of that so that we can have the right kinds of strategies or solutions. So in this case, what we're talking about is that, on the right, it's only by identifying the underlying cause for the challenge, in this case, the missing executive function skill or underdeveloped executive function skill, that we can apply the right approach. So what I'd like to now ask each of you to think about in the chat is, when you're thinking about, all of the things, the student that you put in there, and what are some of the common challenges that you see on the left, have you had any of these thoughts? Do any of these ones jump out at you? Oh my gosh, they're just lazy, or, they're just not motivated, or I wish they would just care more. Are you seeing anything that's really, speaking to you in terms of what you might assume that they're doing, wasting their time, they don't care? Yeah, and I can understand, because I've been there before myself. That's how I got into what we're doing, is that, it would be so frustrating. I can't care more than they do. They're just not motivated to do it. But what I really will promise you is the fact that that's really not the case. And that's the argument we'd really like to make. What I will say before turning over to Lindsay is that we really believe that no student does not want to be successful, that all students want to feel successful. Just like you, if you have a job, or, their being student is their job. If you have a job, you want to be successful. Even if you're not being successful, I guarantee you want to be successful. Even if you find this is not the right job for me, you still want to be successful. And that's really the premise. That yes, as Tara said, they may be overwhelmed and they may underestimate, but those are things that we can deal with.
Exactly. So as we get into the strategies, what Debbie was just sharing, and thank you for everybody for putting that in the chat about the not motivated. I see that they're procrastinating, that they don't care. It's hard not to think that when we don't see them using these skills, or they're using them poorly, and they're not using the help that we are offering. So parents, very well-meaning parents, offer that help and it's shot down. We're going to go through the first way. This slide about removing barriers, we're not going to try to eliminate any friction from life, but we're going to try to understand it so we can better help. So as we can move on to the next one, this key takeaway here is we are going to for the need behind the behavior, not the symptom that you're seeing. The symptom that you're seeing of maybe missing work or loss of focus or not motivated, all of that is a symptom of these underdeveloped skills. We're going to go through a couple of examples, and the first being here, one, missing work. I believe the end of the quarter is tomorrow for Arlington County, and I believe they have the day off on Monday. There's a lot of missing work that can happen throughout the year and throughout the quarter. So frustrating to see that pile on. Here's some examples of some of the executive functions that might be the underlying skill they need strategies for. So even if they know, this is what we do as parents, we might remind them a bunch of times, hey, remember, you got to turn in that paper tomorrow. Remember, you got that paper. Remember, you got that paper. They're aware of it. They're painfully aware of it. That's why we have a lot of anxiety and stress around it. But what they need is the initiation. strategy. They need a strategy for how to get started. For that example that we're talking about, the working memory. Great tool. It has everything right there on the dashboard. Classes I might have to go into modules, and some classes I might have to go into announcements. Or my teacher might have a special website that they post that in. I need to compile all of that information and then do it. So by understanding this, we can start to reframe it to the more helpful understanding of they need a strategy versus it's the laziness or lack. I just had a young student sitting in front of me, senior, was just saying, I'm just lazy. They were using that language about themselves. Okay, well, what do we do about lazy? There's really no solution there. I do have plenty of solutions for your working memory. I do have plenty of solutions for your initiation. First, we have to identify what the barrier is. That's a big one. Feel free to put in the chat if missing work is something that you have also been maybe frustrated by or seen that symptom in your student. But as we move to the next one, this might also look familiar to some. Is these low test scores. Now, this can be a very emotional reaction that we might have. We might have fear for our own failing test scores or lower test scores back. Now, it might not be just they didn't care. Trust me, they care. They absolutely care. No one feels good about getting a failing score or something that they're not proud to share out there. But it's not just because I don't care, I'm not trying, or a lack of motivation again. There's these examples that you see here. The self-monitoring, missing part of the directions, not checking it before they can turn it in. That's a big one. That can ding them and get a lot of points taken off on a test. Now, when working with the student, I often say, okay, self-monitoring is a skill. What did you do? What could we do? They checked over their work and they say that really fast. They're like, yeah, I checked over my work. However, that skill actually needs to be taught. What does checking over your work look like? Yesterday, working with a student, we used an old test, flipped it upside down, now reread the math direction. He was like, what? Why? This is so uncomfortable. That's not going to help. Because it slowed his brain down just enough for him to be like, oh, shoot, I missed that I was actually supposed to find the y variable. I solved for x. By flipping it upside down, it was a quick strategy to say, I'm going to look at this problem in a novel way, and it's going to slow my brain down to catch those. Then we use the strategy of, I'm going to actually circle and star each one that I've done that for, that I've actually checked over. So by teaching the right skill and the how, then we can have the right solution there. If I just assumed that that student wasn't trying or that they didn't care, I wouldn't have a remedy and that student would back. So our last example here, go through kind of quickly here, but the big one that we saw in the chat, that not accepting help. It is very hard, as any adult supporting a student, to see them struggling, knowing that we might be able to have some of these strategies or them, and they're not accepting it. Now, here are just some of the reasons why it might be. I don't want to expose my vulnerabilities. The reason why I, as an executive function coach, might be able to say something that mom just said in the car ride over to come see me, the exact same thing. The reason why is they are scared to be emotionally vulnerable because they care about your opinions so much. They really do. I'm neutral. I'm low stakes. I am not their parent. So they might show that a little bit more with some third party. That's another big reason why they might not be expecting their help. They don't want to show that yet, especially in the middle school, teenage years. Another one I'll just highlight here is the shifting focus. Sometimes when we're off asking for help, we're asking them to use their flexible thinking. Think of something in a different way. Try something in a different way. Try a different strategy. That's where you might go, oh, no, that's not how we do it anymore. That's not how we do math anymore. Been in school for a long while. I remember a student trying to tell me about like in-text citations. That's not the way you do it. Wait, I'm not that old. I haven't been out of school that long. Like, I think I know this, but what I was asking them to use was their flexible thinking, their shifting skill there. So by acknowledging that, it helped me actually then work with that student in a different way. So this is why we're telling you this, because if we think it's disrespect, we might try to punish. Okay, well then go to your room. Then they're still stuck there. They're still not accepting help, and the problem isn't solved. So by understanding where the missing skill might lie, find the right solution. We'll move on to the next one here, get actually into some of these strategies that can help.
So as Lindsay was said, there's really the first step in how we can be solutions oriented is really understanding the need behind the behavior, and that's really what she just went through. And then the second is really bringing that solutions orientation, suggesting strategies versus really assuming that there's a problem. And we're all very guilty of that. I'm included, children of my own that I've made terrible mistakes with over time. But really what that looks like is, I guess, best described by what it doesn't look like. So what we typically say really has to do with a lot of what we talked about tonight already. So we ask a question that really isn't exactly the question, hopefully, that you've learned that you want to ask, because it assumes that they know all of it and that they know how, right? So it assumes that, do you have homework? Assumes, yes, I've looked through it all and I know exactly how to get started, etc. But what's really happening in most cases is that, or in many cases, that really the biggest barrier is initiation. So whether it's initiation to go into the portal, or it's initiation once I've gone to the portal to get started, or don't necessarily know where to start. And so what I wanted to ask each of you to do, again, if you wouldn't mind in the chat, is think to yourself, have there ever been projects, whether it's in your personal life or your work life, that you have had hard time starting? So for me, it used to be my expenses. I traveled all the time and I just couldn't get my head wrapped around getting my expenses. And I feel like it really took, as I'll talk about in a minute, the panic monster to kind of help me, because the expenses had, it was 6 months and it was like 5 months and whatever days, or getting started on my taxes, or getting even anything that has to do with big amounts of paperwork I'm finding. And I'm wondering if you might want to share what you might have problems getting started with, if there's anything similar like that to you. And the reason, as I guess people are right, thank you, Angie, taxes, the same thing with me, anything with paperwork, right? So the challenge that I think you guys will probably all see is that there's a need behind that behavior. There's a reason that there are barriers for our students in terms of getting started. And this is actually an exercise out of our study skills course. And we ask students, when you have a hard time organizing paperwork, thank you, Janet, anything with a deadline, Kelly, what is that need behind the behavior? What is really underneath that? And you can see there's a number of selections here on the left. I don't know what I have to do. I don't know how to do it. It's only worth a few points, or maybe it's not worth as much in our professional lives, or maybe it's worth a huge amount of time. So all of these can cause stress and anxiety. And because they cause stress and anxiety, they put up a barrier. And we often talk about it as like the wall of awful, right? It puts this wall of awful, and it's really sometimes just too hard to climb. And what you see here on the right is actually from a video that's one of the most popular videos on the TED.com, and it's Inside the Mind of a Master Procrastinator. And really what happens is that Tim Urban talks about how habitual procrastinators must constantly defend against what you see here on the left, which is the instant gratification monkey. So the instant gratification monkey actually wants to tell this guy who's got the wheel, this guy saying, rational decision maker saying, it's a really great time to do homework or fold the laundry, or any task that intimidates me, or budgeting, for my kitchen remodel expenses. And then the instant gratification monkey says, no, it's time to go play on TikTok, or not, that's what you guys are doing, but that's what these kids are doing, or I'd rather be doing all these other things because I have all this anxiety. And really the only thing that scares the instant gratification monkey is actually the panic monster. So have, any of you guys seen, feel free to share in the chat. I know I have, that as Lindsay said, the end of the quarter comes and all of a sudden they somehow miraculously get all this kind of work turned in, because all of a sudden this last minute deadline, it motivates them. And I know saw somebody say something, Kelly say anything with the deadline, and that's because the panic monster comes and they help scare away the instant gratification monkey and gets it all done. So what do we do? So what are we to do as parents to be solutions oriented? And I'll turn that over to Lindsay to share more.
Exactly. Yeah. And anything without that deadline, it's incredibly hard to initiate, because where's the motivation there? So as I go through the next couple of slides, I just want you to keep in mind that the developing frontal lobe is incredibly bad at making decisions. It's just bad. It's learning how to, but it's making poor decisions left and right. And that's what kind of maybe we're seeing. So you might have seen on the previous slide, one of those examples was, okay, I don't feel like it. That's exactly what it is. When are you going to feel like it? When urgency might set in, when panic sets in. So we're going to go through what maybe students typically see. They're given a list of work. They're given a list of due dates. So now what the fully developed and neurotypical brain will make decisions when they see a list like this, list of due dates. They might decide what to do based on importance, based on any kind of future reward they might get from doing that task, or trying to avoid any future consequence from not doing that task. That's that fully developed frontal lobe. When you see this list, now I'm not anti-list, we're not anti-list, but a list is not a plan. So I'm sure there's plenty of list makers in this group here. You know, I got my list here. But I know how to organize and prioritize that list. So in the chat, actually, I'm going to ask you all to just share, how do you decide what's important? How do you decide what's important? Due date is pretty much that students have the experience. Deadlines, right? Even as adults, we use that to decide what's important. Students look at what's due to, and that has importance. And that's probably what you're seeing in middle and high school is they can't just do that anymore. They can't just look at what to do tomorrow and do that night before. So what we want to do is keep in mind that to change the behavior, we got to remove friction. And we got to add some fuel for that motivation, right? Due date impact. So this is a strategy and a tool that we use. Right on the other side of my computer, we have some students here doing homework right as we speak. But when I say removing friction, the first thing that we do is take that list and we make a plan out of it. So we get everything in one place and we give specifics to it. Now, the reason why that's a good strategy and why that works is because if I say, oh, I got to do my math homework tonight, that does not give me a clear target of when I'm going to be done. When I'm going to be done is a strategy to help us initiate. So if I say I had 13 problems for math and I list that specifically, I've removed the friction of having to go find it online on the portal again. In one place, and I have a very clear finish line of when I'm going to be done. Now, also to figure out how many problems I have to do, I have to preview it. So that's another strategy that we have built into using a plan like this. Previewing it removes a lot of friction because we often assume it is incredibly satisfying to be planning with a student here, and then they're like, oh, it's going to be really hard. I go, okay, well, let's take a look at it together. Oh, it's only 5 sentences? I can do 5 sentences, but it had essay in the title. So no wonder that was causing a lot of anxiety and maybe making it feel like it's going to take forever. They just want a 5-sentence that. And then this third strategy that's built into a plan like this is going to be following a strategy of prioritizing and ordering their assignments, add fuel and energy. By starting with something easy to help build that momentum, feel satisfaction, hitting submit, marking something done. We have that what's left column. When they put done in that first number 1 task, they have just added fuel that will help them sustain through the next, which is the most difficult, that might take the longest, the thing they might procrastinate on. Now, then they can shift back to easy, and following through that can help them sustain their focus and their attention. They get to leave and feel satisfied about the work that they did. So they've just turned a list of due dates, actionable plan, getting that work done. That's one strategy. And then we're going to shift to the next slide. And then actually, if we just pause for 1 second here, think if I said the fully developed and neurotypical brain uses importance and future rewards and future consequences as there's other things that motivate the developing frontal lobe who might be impacted. So those are novelty, interest, urgency, right, or challenge. So we like to use this strategy of on-ramping to help activate some of that interest into an assignment. Lower the barrier into it. Maybe we topic exploration. Maybe I have you draw a picture about it on the whiteboard. Maybe we just preview it together. Maybe we watch a video on the topic. student was just really loathing and very anxious about a math test tomorrow, I said, okay, let's watch a Khan Academy video and write on my wall. And you can write on the whiteboard. You can write on the glass wall in my office here, because it added that novelty and it added a little bit more interest of watching a video. So these are ways that you can strategize with that on-ramp, make that initiation a little bit easier. That's one way, these examples you see on the screen. And then we have a few others. So if we move to the next one, thinking about some of us saying the taxes, all the paperwork, filing paperwork. I think I saw a kitchen renovation, which, oh, that might actually be one that would, the interest there, but it might be the steps to it that is the barrier. Take a look at what you see here on the screen. Any of these strategies, first good initiation strategy. I'll draw your attention to maybe moving to another room, going to a different location, going to the coffee shop and getting work done, shifting up where you're sitting. And then I'll draw your attention to another one of like setting up the motivators, the rewards. I mean, I don't know how many times I've even told myself, okay, I'll send this kind of tricky, hard email and then I'll fill up my coffee. It's a little reward that we as adults say to ourselves all the time. We are using that to help ourselves initiate. That's what we need to make our students aware of too. It's not just about you have to willpower your way through it. Make the strategies that you are using as an adult day in and day out visible to them. Narrate for them. Yeah, I was having a really hard time getting started on something. I really didn't want to call the doctor's office. I didn't really want to. Right now I have to change I got a new car, a new license. I got to change my Easy Pass to match my license. There's no urgency there. I'm not going on but I know that I could close all my tabs and just open up the Easy Pass, make it real visible in my mind, and then it'd be easy. This is a good one to keep in mind as a parent, because when we remind students of the homework, it instantly can start a fight. We very well-meaningly just want to remind, hey, remember, oh yeah, you have that paper due tomorrow, right? I'm doing it. You never trust me. You don't believe I can do it. And it instantly does it because they're going into fight or flight mode. When we remind about a strategy, it reduces the barrier. You're not attacking them. It doesn't, and you're never attacking them, but it feels to them like you are. But reminding them about a strategy actually that we're facing. Not them, the problem is that they need. So hopefully a couple of these stick out.
Sorry, I missed the last thing you said, Linz.
No, I was just saying that hopefully these will be that parents can remind their student to use a strategy to get started.
Yep, and what we do a lot with students as we move on is these very, very small strategies. I think we're always looking for really big ones, but sometimes it's really just the smallest things that get kids going. And often, again, I hear from parents that, once they get going, they can get it done really quickly, but it's just getting them going that's sometimes the harder part. And I think that's why often kids have struggle with when they take breaks, because they don't want to take a break because they're getting going, and they're afraid that they just won't be able to reinitiate. Yes, I saw that. Yeah, Lindsay, you've been cutting in and out a little bit. So the third piece of it that we want to talk a little bit about is watering the seeds. So the entire theme, hopefully, of what we've been talking about is really that instead of just assuming that students know how to get into the work because they're, in middle school or high school or college, and they should just know how to get into their porters, and they should just be able to get started. If we're seeing challenges of all the things we've been talking about, the process-oriented challenges, we must assume that there's an underlying skills deficit, whether you can pinpoint it to specific executive function skill, that because you don't have to memorize all 8 of them. And by doing that, then we can help to try to rebuild those skills versus just think they don't care. And that's the big message that we've really been trying to share. And understanding that the skill makes such a big difference. So watering the seeds, what does that really mean? Watering the seeds means, as this says, the seeds we plant and we water are what blooms. So what it means is if we're going to put our energy and attention to the not doing of things or to the arguing of the homework, then that's really where the attention goes. And that's really where we're watering. But what we want to do is water the seeds of process. So what that means is that we want to be able to say to them things like, you know, I really see how hard you're studying for that test, or I really, even the smallest things, I really like, you know, how is it you just get going like that? Sometimes I have such a hard time get going. So it's not that kids always struggle every single day to get going. So if we ever can catch them doing the smallest amount of something, you know, or even the parts of the process that they do really well, that's the key. So there's really three ways to water the seeds. And I think that was where some of the questions were coming from. One is we want to reflect and not just remind them like, hey, you know, don't you have homework, whatever. So when they're asking questions like, hey, can I do XYZ, you know, and we say, don't you have homework tonight or whatever, we really, instead of saying that, instead of implying that you're kind of getting them or that they know about it or have they forgotten about it, right? So, oh yeah, what's the thing you could get started on easily, or how long do you think that homework you have will take? Assuming they know that they have homework and, you know, that they've already really assumed. And as Michelle said, great tips for managing employees as well. Absolutely. And spouses, it's all good for that. We're just not going to assume that they didn't do that thing on that list, that, you know, that really that, oh yeah. So how was doing that thing? And so I know, and we know that in your brain, you might go, hey, you know, maybe we're asking these questions, but they're just not going to do it. They're not going to change anything. I promise that it's going to, over time, if we continue to water the seeds of what they are doing well and continue to try to help them to get started and maybe make a plan instead of a list, that it will change over time. So instead of saying, hey, do you study for that test yet? Or, you know, I haven't seen you study at all, you know, oh yeah, you know, I know that you're doing that test on periodic table. I had a hard time. What strategy are you using to remember all of that? Or, you know, what are some of those elements that have popped on lately that I didn't know? Or, you know, I know that Dad always seems to do a great job testing you. Is that something you want to do? Or, you know, can we gamify it, right? Come up with some games or watch some videos on it, because sometimes, you know, kids will let you do it. Or sometimes I just sit down and start watching stuff on what my daughter might be studying. She'll go, oh, what's that? Oh yeah, there's this like real interesting strategy for how to memorize that thing. So it's really about, again, the very process-oriented things. And the key here is try to make a connection. There's a statement called connection before correction. So try to make a connection and avoid these yes or no questions. Go on, Lynn.
Yeah, so exactly all that Debbie was just sharing is that you're prompting that reflection and you're not reminding them. That's that metacognition, that's that self-monitoring piece, that you're prompting them to think about themselves. Then you again are not the enemy as mom or dad. You're just trying to remind, and you're not trying to be the enemy, but them reflect on their own process. Now, when they do have a successful process, a little trap that we can sometimes walk into is the gotcha, or like the I told you so. That can be a demotivator. And what we're trying to say tonight is that by being a cheerleader, their executive function develop by being their cheerleader. So instead of just, wow, you got an A, that's praising the result. We want to help them praise on the process. So I would say instead of that is, you work so hard there. How did you study? Now they have to stop and pause and use their metacognition skill there to think about, what did I study there? And then the likelihood of them repeating that success is more likely than if you just praise the result. That does not increase the likelihood that they're going to use that strategy again. So that's one example here. We'll go through a couple. You'll see some of these, like when they do finally finish that project. Could you imagine if you shared with your spouse, honey, I got the taxes done early. I got them done. And they said, see, it wasn't so hard. I told you you could get it done in an afternoon. Your whole excitement would just go deflate out of your body. Now, instead of that, be like, oh, that must feel so great. Asking them what strategy, what worked. I put on some music, or I met up with a friend for lunch and we did it side by side together. Like that worked, and I finally got the taxes. Then they get to feel proud. Then they get to keep owning that feeling of, instead of feeling deflated that I should have gotten started or after. That's another example. So we'll go through, we'll just show these that up on this. Takeaway is, are praising the process. What skill did they use? questions to help them genuinely reflect on what skill they used and strategy they used. And then the last one here, am I cutting it out too? Oh. Debbie, we move on to the next.
Yeah, sorry.
So hopefully you can hear me, but yeah, Debbie, if it's too bad, just kind of take over here. But this last one here is when I said you don't want to be the enemy, you're not trying to be, but sometimes accidentally it can be you versus me, parent. Now that's that unhealthy conflict. What we want to do is triangulate against the problem. The problem is need an initiation or they need a planning strategy, actively study. They are not the problem, but we're huge fans of Rachel Bailey. If any of you know her, amazing parenting coach. She has a great saying is they are having a problem, not being a problem. So how we can do this, how we can focus on the problem and not the person to help them accept a little bit more of that help that we're offering here are a couple of different ways that we can use our language. We move on to the next slide here. We have some examples here. Now, by focusing on the problem, we might try to punish. So we might say something like, when we see that missing work, can't go out with your friends until all that missing work or that missing work is finished. Now, what we're trying to do is motivate them. We're trying to help them initiate by giving a motivation. The carrot in front of you, you get to hang out with your friends for that consequence. Remember, that's not how their frontal lobe is working. It's not going to be thinking of that future reward or consequence, and it's not able to replace that skill that's missing, initiation. Try saying, let's make a plan together, see how we can break it down to do a little bit each day so that you get to hang out with your friends. Now we have the solution built in there. We have a little bit of that carrot. Yeah, I get to see my friend, but I have a strategy in there. Let's break it down, do a little bit each day. That's one way. Another example or way to do this is just saying, when they come home and they share with you, or you might even see on student view, parent view, that they had a failing test score. Now, seeing that, gotcha, like, see, I told you you needed to study. Or what recently happened with a student, I told you stayed up too late. That's why you got a C on that test. You're so tired. Can that be true? Can that be valid that their performance on that test was impacted by their sleep? Absolutely. But it doesn't solve the problem, and it's triangulating, it's focusing it that you're the problem. You didn't get enough sleep. Now, instead of that, we can try say, validate that does feel awful. And then if you ask them that question, what do you think of the barrier was? Then that gives them the opportunity to be like, well, you know what? I was really tired. I was having trouble focusing. Then they can help be that hero of their own story of coming up with the strategy and the solution there. We don't want to just demotivate by saying, I told you so, or you got to change this. Now, I'll just pause and say one more phrase here when we're talking about focusing on not the person, is you're not trying to say that you have to approve of a lower test score, or it doesn't mean that you're accepting of that lower test score. All of this is just about saying, let's help them solve the problem. And the first way is to validate that it does feel awful. They don't want to feel that way either. Try to collaborate together on what the solution was to that barrier, whatever it might be. Our goal, like it says here, is to help them reflect on it.
All right, so hopefully we've shared some information and that's been helpful and given you a chance to reflect. But the main, I guess, takeaways are that, as we said, there's really always a missing skill behind at least these academically oriented behaviors when we're seeing that our students aren't meeting their potential. And we think to ourselves, but they're so smart. Hopefully what you're saying to yourself right now is, I heard what Debbie and Lindsay had to say, and it has nothing to do with how smart they are, because they're not even accessing the cognitive capabilities if they can't initiate. So really, that's the whole idea, is that, they really are missing a skill. And that's great news for everyone here. I know I raised a very challenging son when it came to executive functions, and it really took me a long time to understand. I tell his sister that she was the benefit of all of that, because I learned, and I really have been able to, I guess, help her learn the process aspects. And she now uses the word strategy all the time. I'm going to find a strategy. I'm going to break it down. I'm going to study over time. And these are things that are skills for life. And we always say start by introducing one skill. Let's think of an initiation strategy of maybe changing where we're working, thinking of reward systems, trying to help preview. Hey, let's take a look at that assignment, right? Let's figure out how to highlight it and break it down. And, again, we're not trying to say that we have the silver bullets. These are longer term goals and they do take time. Certainly, we love to help students with executive function and study skills, and we do these types of webinars and we have people that speak at our center all the time. So we hope that if you're interested, you can email info@StudyPro.com, even if it's just to listen to the other experts that are speaking at our center all the time. And, we do hope that you cheer your student on to build their executive function skills by watering those seeds and catching them do those things that are right that you want to see grow, because we cannot put the energy to the areas that we think are challenging for them only. We really need to focus on the things that they're doing well and build up their confidence, because we know the more confident we are, right, the more resilient we become, and that's only a good thing. It's a virtuous cycle. So we'll end with 2 slides. One to say that we are starting our classes now for 2022, actually on Sunday, a week from the Sunday, so on February 6th. And those are study skills for 4th, 5th, 6th through 8th, and 9th through 12th. So time management, organization, breaking work down, etc. You can get information on our website and here. And then also, next in this webinar series is the reducing homework friction by improving the time management and planning skills. So if you have seen this and you're like, okay, now I want either to share with my student or myself a little bit of a deeper dive on time management and planning, that's really what we're doing. So we'll probably have a little bit of information that's the same, but then we're going to go a little deeper. And then the third in this series, as we said, was really with Dr. Andrea Brenner, who wrote the book How to College, and we're going to talk about what really is the difference between the executive function skills we need in high school and what we have to do to prepare for college. So I think that's going to be pretty fascinating. We will open it up for questions. We have a few minutes left, so if anybody has any questions, thank you for all of the kind comments. We have 5 or 6 minutes, so we're more than happy to answer questions if you have something specific about your student. Oh, I should also mention, which I didn't put in here, Lindsay, can you put in the chat? We have a landing page just for these Yorktown presentations, and we'll send it out in the replay link, with the replay link, but it's basically www.thestudypro.com/Yorktown. And that's where you'll find the replay and all the information about the future webinars. And Lindsay, do you want to ask, and yes, there will be a recording, and you want to answer the question about the working memory?
Mm-hmm. So Janet, the first thing that I'll say is this first on not trying to depend on your working memory as much. So your working memory only really ability 5 to 7 units of information at a max. There is a reason why that your social security number and your phone number are only, it's because even the most fully developed excellent working memory skills have a finite capacity. So focus really on strategies that help you not depend on it as much. So you want to offload that information. So offloading it into a sticky note, offloading it into, even if people are giving me directions, maybe I'm counting on my fingers on what those directions might be. So another one for students specifically with working memory is the directions are posted on Canvas. They need to type it in a Google Doc. We have them copy and paste those directions in the thing. So then when they scroll on the page, those directions are always there. So they're not dependent on their working memory for having to remember it and then use it, moving the friction of having to keep going back to Canvas to reread it, to try to reabsorb it. So that's just another strategy. So think about it of trying to offload the information and try to anchor the information, like counting it on your fingers, ways that you can help your working memory. I hope that helps.
I was trying to think, yes, there's a recording available, and you talked about upside down with math. Can you explain that?
Sorry. So if I'm using like even my like slides notes here, this student had like an old test, and this is like you read upside top down, right? So I just put it on the table opposite, so he had to read it like this. So the directions were at the top. So you can still read the words, but it just has it slow it down a little bit, and it's the novelty of seeing it a different way. So it was one that I wouldn't suggest to do on every single problem, but we were walking through, I had him look through, okay, what are the ones that you made a mistake on? He noticed right away they were all ones that took up the whole page of his work. So we go, okay, just on those, there's only 2 of those. Just on those 2, that probably tells us that there's multiple steps. Then flip it upside down just real quick on those and reread it, and your brain will catch a mistake easier than if you just try to reread it again. Your brain will assume, tries to find patterns, it tries to categorize information. So if it's already read it, it will skim over it really quickly and be like, oh yeah, I got those directions. So I hope that explains it. So I literally just 180'd it on the table, so upside down.
All right, I think that's the end of our question. I know that we had a question about does anyone at APS schools talk to our students about the executive function skills? I don't know if Dana or Janet want to address that, but I think typically sometimes they do have skills like that, and maybe Dana's coming back on.
I think how that's addressed, it varies by school. I know that it's something that the schools consider important, but I don't think there is a specific study skills program within the school system. I know that TAs or Patriot Period or Wolf Period, or the homeroom sort of period sometimes works on some of that along with social emotional learning. But I don't think it's something you can count on getting. Does that make sense to others who are on this call? Is that your experience as well? That's been mine.
Yeah, generally that's been our experience as well, is that sometimes you'll get it from this teacher, that teacher, but not necessarily as a kind of system.
Right. So that's one of the reasons why we in the PTA identified this as something that we knew we needed, for our kids. And in our surveys within our own community, executive function skills were among the top 3 issues that parents named. They named social emotional learning and just in general mental well-being. That's a big topic, but that was number 1. Executive function skills were number 2. Of all the things people could have named that they found to be a concern for their kids, that was number 2. Number 3 was college preparation. So those were the things that our parents identified, which really provided wonderful guidance. Thanks to everybody who answered our surveys. It was fantastic. So that was the guidance. And that's why we're so grateful that you all are doing 3 of them with us this year. Thank you.
Yep, we're excited too. We could talk about it all day.
I think I could too. So I have also posted the link to your event with us last year. Also a really wonderful introduction to all of these topics. And it is a wonderful companion piece to this evening, because there were some different angles used in the approach, like, since you brought Rachel Bailey in last year, she talked about some of the psychological and emotional issues behind some executive function concerns. And she talked from a psychological and emotional standpoint about how one might address them, in addition to all this really, really, really useful information you're giving us.
And Rachel just spoke at the StudyPro on a webinar last week, and we have that on our website. We'll share that too. So absolutely, she's amazing. She just spoke on how to help support students or children with big emotions. So that was really, really helpful. And all of those webinars are on our website, and obviously for free. So thank you, Lindsay, for putting that link. And we'll share that again, all those links when we're sending it out, as well as the TED Talk that we referred to.
I registered for your Big Emotions seminar. I haven't gotten to watch it yet, but I'm looking forward to that.
She's great. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So there were a couple of other little things. There was one person who said that some study skills are covered for special ed students in instructional studies.
Mm-hmm.
That's terrific. But a lot of our kids don't have access to that. So before we close out, are there any final comments or thoughts that you all would like to share? Any sort of summing up that you might like to give our folks?
From us?
Yes, I'm sorry.
Oh,
Yes.
okay. Oh, no, I think we kind of summarized everything, but but we appreciate
You
that.
did.
Yeah.
You did, and it was
At a
fantastic.
time.
Thank you for having us.
So thank you so very much for all of this. And thanks to everybody who joined us. It was great to have you all with us. Thanks again to Debbie Rosen and Lindsay Toms of the StudyPro. Thank you again.
Good night,
Good night.
everybody.
Good night.